Richarlison. Now, obviously, the Richarlison deal has been hotting up intensely over the last 48 hours, and it is no different today. Fabrizio Romano reporting on Twitter, Tottenham are progressing in talks with Everton for Richarlison. Negotiations are already well advanced on personal terms, while discussions between clubs will continue this week. Alistair Gold says there's a growing confidence within Spurs that they will get their man in Richarlison. Matt Law following on that story as well, saying Richarlison wants to join Tottenham, and as well he uses the same term, growing confidence that Tottenham will be signing their man. I'm gone on record that I'm super excited about getting him through the door. I think he'd be an excellent addition to the squad. I think he really adds quality and depth and actually competition for our forward line. But we are yet to know the structure of the deal. Rumours that it could be 60 million. Will Winks be involved? There are rumours as well. Matt Law saying there's potential that Spurs could write off any future fee for Dele Alli to try and get this deal over the line. How do you see this deal progressing? And are you on the same page as me? Are you happy about it?
I'm not on the same page as you, mate. No, because first and foremost, I feel like the only way that the Richarlison deal makes sense financially for me is if we happen to if we can find a way to get rid of, say, Harry Winks, or if there's an interest in Lucas Moura going the other way, or if we're also going to attach it with a deal for someone like Anthony Gordon, who I would absolutely, and that's been touted around the media, and I really do admire Anthony Gordon. I'm not that massive a fan of Richarlison. I know that we've spoken back and forth about this on WhatsApp and that we can look at the stats of the guy. I just don't think he's value for money at that level. And the only way that you get the value down to a point where you could find value in it is when you start to bolt on these other players. But if you do that, as far as I understand, and what I've learned by talking to some people that are kind of more knowledgeable on the subject than I am, that you start to add so much complexity. The more player plus, cash swap deals that you do, it involves more agents, more medical, examinations, more like just structure and complexity to the deal. And when we're trying to get these deals done before they go to career, time is ticking, right? And so I just feel like it's complicated enough as it is on a position that. Let me rephrase it this way. Sim, would you be happy us having Richarlison net might well end up being a club record signing? Would you be happy with Richarlison as a club record signing if you think at best put aside injuries, we don't know what will happen there, but if there is no injuries, at best he'll probably play 40% of the minutes next season at most?
I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say at most he'll play 40%. I'm definitely thinking he's going to play more than that. And he's coming in. You got to remember his attitude. He's coming in thinking. He's not thinking like us, like, oh, they have Kane and Son, and they're clearly better. He's going to want to prove that he's better than them. He's going to want to prove that he's got superior quality. And I think he's done really well at Everton. I think he's been, ever since he's gone to Everton, he's been a shining light in a team which has always struggled pretty much over the last 4 years. Whether they had Benitez, Ancelotti, Ronald Koeman, Marco Silva, I think he has shone, in my opinion, under all those regimes. And he's always been a cut above all of them. And for me, I think he's 25 years of age. I think he's a player who obviously is a Brazilian international. He actually starts for Brazil at the moment. He covers two positions, left winger and striker. With Son and Kane approaching 30 and even going over 30 at the moment, I'm not saying they're anywhere near finished, but we have to start thinking about if they are over the next, especially with Son, for me, because I think because his game relies so heavily on pace. If he is going to slow down, let's say over the next 2-3 years, then we have a player there in Richarlison ready to take the reins potentially from Heung-min Son. Right now, they're going to have to compete for game time, but I think for me, Richarlison can take a step up and improve levels. Joining a better team, having better players, Champions League football, he'll have that renewed motivation at Spurs. Whereas at Everton, he was battling for mid-table, or he was battling to stay up from relegation. When they really needed him, he really did step up. But for me, I feel like he wants to be in Champions League. He wants to be challenging higher up the table, and that could bring a new level out of him. And yeah, all right, it's
he could bring a new level out of him, though, right?
Huh?
We haven't seen him score enough goals. You know, he got outscored last season if you take away penalties, and of course the penalties are not going to. He's not going to be his to take in the Tottenham team. Yeah. Do you actually? He got outscored by, like I've said to you before, Emmanuel Dennis, who you could go and get for 20 million, who could play across the front three, do a job in the 9, the 7, or the 11. Like, I'm not saying that Emmanuel Dennis is an exciting transfer either, but just as an example, when you actually look at the stats and you compare them, or compare many other players as well, you can throw in a whole bunch of players. You could throw Danny Ings into the mix just as an example and look at. And I just don't think Richarlison stands out against them. And as a wing forward, Richarlison's been woeful. Sorry, man.
The difference between, let's say, Richarlison and Emmanuel Dennis is Emmanuel Dennis had an unbelievable first half of the season and then barely scored a goal after January. Richarlison has been fairly consistent for about 4 years now. And you'd even throw in that Watford season where he was pretty good for Watford as well, which convinced Everton to sign him. So that's probably like 5 years in the Premier League. He's been scoring double figures every single year for struggling sides.
Barely double figures, though, right?
He's got them though. He got them every. This is consistency for 5 years for struggling teams. He's getting double figures. This isn't a one-off thing. This isn't like a Michu where one-off season he did really well. Like, this is consistently he is providing for his team double figures. And I think for me, if you put him in a team where he's got better players around him, a manager like Antonio Conte, who loves a fighter like Richarlison, who can bring him to a new level, you've got a player who's fighting for his World Cup space as well. I think this is easily a player who could, for us, and you've got to remember, we already have Son and Kane. So for us,
so whose position does he take then?
It's not about whose position he takes. It's about adding depth to the squad, and it's about having a player who can come in and start many games. It's like for me, when you look at Liverpool, right? They have Mane and Salah, and they could have a massive game in the Premier League on the weekend, and they could have a Champions League quarterfinal on midweek. Yeah. They could very easily rest Salah for the Champions League quarterfinal and play him in the big Premier League game, or do vice versa. And it's not a new story. No one talks about it. They could do the same with Mane. Why? Why is it not a story when if they rest Salah or if they don't play Mane? It's because they got quality in depth. They got Diaz, they got Jota, they got Firmino, they got these players coming in. We have to be the same. We have to get to a level where it's not a story if we decide to rest Kane or Son for a game, or if they leave him out, or like when someone's going through his bad period last season, he comes out for a few games because he needs to recuperate or whatever. We need to get to a point where it isn't a massive deal and it's not a big story that they're not in the team every single week. And I think with signings like Richarlison, that's exactly what we're doing.
Do you think, though, that Tottenham are at the same level? I know in our minds, Tottenham are always the best and always should be treated and thought of as the best. But do you think players that are coming to Tottenham, do you think Harry Kane will tolerate, if he stays injury free, do you actually think he'll tolerate being dropped for Richarlison?
Yes, 100%. I'll tell you why. Because last season, it's well documented that he played the majority of the season in the red zone, which is very high susceptible for injury. And you got to remember that Kane wants longevity in his career. He's focused on not. And he doesn't want to be a Rooney where he's done by 32. He's looking at Benzema, Lewandowski, Ronaldo, who are still doing it 35, 36. And I think he's.
So why wasn't he subbed then when we were 4-0 up against 4-1 up against Aston Villa away, when we were 5-0 up against Newcastle, when we were 5-0 up against Everton, when we were 5-0 up against Norwich, 6-0 up against Norwich? He still never came off the pitch.
He doesn't trust the players in reserve.
You don't need to trust anyone when you're 6-0 up on the last game of the season with 5 minutes to go. I had this argument yesterday on my channel with Kuba. Like I get it if there's something at risk, if there was goal difference was a big deal at the time, you can understand it a little bit. But when there's 85 minutes on the clock and you still don't take off Harry Kane for a Dane Scarlett or to put Bergwijn on, it was the common theme at Tottenham last season was Kulusevski got subbed. If there was ever a sub of the front three, Kulusevski came off. Lucas Moura came on, despite Lucas Moura not deserving his space ahead of Bergwijn, but because Lucas Moura played naturally on the right, Kulusevski didn't have the same, in my opinion, kudos, or the same brownie points, the same wins in the locker. Then Kulusevski was the first and most obvious one to sacrifice. And then after that, about the 88th minute, you'd get Son taken off, and even that, it didn't matter at the time whether Sonny was, run ragged throughout the game or looked exhausted, and Kulusevski was playing better. The same thing happened the entire season, or the entire second half of the season when Kulusevski joined. It was Lukulu for Mora on the 75th minute, Bergwijn for Son in the 88th minute, giving Bergwijn a few minutes here or there, with the exception of the West Ham game in the Carabao Cup, with the exception of the Leicester game where he did well. And Harry Kane never got substituted. And to make the argument that there was a risk in dropping Harry Kane when you're 5-0 up in certain games doesn't add up to me. But I think that Harry Kane had like a kind of a rule of thumb, and I don't know how happy he's going to be. He wants to compete for the Golden Boot next season. I just don't see him being particularly willing to or happy to come off the bench or come off for Richarlison or whoever else. I think it's going to cause a little bit of problems for me.
I disagree. I think, look, does Kane want trophies or not? Like, we can't have this narrative that Kane is desperate to win trophies, but then he's so obsessed with individual things that he's not willing to sacrifice it. But I think we even saw in the second half of last season when he was going through a great spell, but then he went through a spell where he was just laying it on a plate for Sonny. It wasn't even looking like we beat West Ham 3-1. We beat Everton, not Everton. We beat who was it? Was it Villa 4-0? He didn't score a goal. He was just laying it on a plate because he was doing a job for the team. I think he wants to win trophies. I think he's won Golden Boots. He's done that now. I'm not saying he doesn't. Obviously, he wants more. I'm not saying he doesn't want the Golden Boot. But I think with Conte at the helm, he sees the bigger picture of potential to win major things. And I think if it means bringing Richarlison and keeping himself fit for other games, if he's in that red zone and we can take him out, I think he would be willing to do that. I think last season, second half of the last season, we were obviously playing one game a week. But next season, Champions League, we can't do what we did last season when in terms of European football, where we can play a weakened team in midweek and think that's okay, because Champions League, you get found out. You need good quality players coming in who are as good as the players going out. And I think that this is a step in the right direction for me. I think you need these good players as in reserve. And I think we need to stop being so concerned about who's going to play what game time and all that kind of stuff. We just need as much quality depth as possible. And I'm okay with that. Is a brilliant signing for me. I think he's the perfect guy who can because he hasn't played in the like Champions League and stuff, he's still at a stage where he kind of wants to prove himself. But I think he's shown enough quality for me that I believe he can make the step up. And I think Everton fans, I've spoken to a few, they absolutely adore him. They think he's more than ready for Champions League football. From what I see, I think for me, from what I see from him in Everton shirt, I think he's got bundles of ability, energy. He's a proper Conte player, good shithousery as well. I think in a year's time, I'm not saying it's for sure, but in a year's time, we could be sitting here saying, like, he's in our main three. Like, he could be starting. No, who knows? You don't know, because you don't know. I'm just saying things change quickly in football, and he could easily be making it. He could be better than any of us think he is.
He could be, mate. And I hope that so I'm not even saying he's a bad player. I think he's a very good player, and I think that he doesn't get the credit he deserves for the shithousery that he creates. A lot of the things that he does, draws fouls, for example, draws yellow cards on certain players that are never going to be, like represented in his stats, right? If he goes and draws a foul, gets a player a yellow card, that player then can't go and play to 100% for the rest of the game. That's an absolute asset that Richarlison has. I also think he draws fouls. He doesn't then take the free kicks at Everton. So there's goals and assists and all those sorts of assists, all those sorts of stats that are going to be padded because of the attributes that Richarlison has. I'm by no means saying that he's a bad player, and I'm by no means saying that he doesn't improve Tottenham's forward line. He absolutely does. Would I rather have him over Bergwijn? Would I rather have him over Lucas Moura? 100%. For me, the reason where my reservation comes from is the price tag and what we can't do if we spend that much money on him, what we could otherwise do if we spent something a little bit less on a player, because I still believe that he's not going to play as many minutes as you do. And I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. If we're going to spend that much money on a player, then I want to see the minutes to justify it. So we'll see what happens. But for me, I just feel like that there's bigger holes to fill in the squad. And thus far, we are focusing, or all of the news and the media suggests we're focusing on positions like, left-sided centre-back, which is important, and all the centre-backs are important. But for me, I want to see our marquee club record signing. I would like to see it in the right wing-back spot. I wouldn't mind seeing it in a creative midfielder role. It doesn't look like Eriksen's going to happen, but I said this to you before, Sim, on your show a couple of weeks ago. We dropped 25 points from low block teams last season. If you solve for that, then that's 91 points that we'd have, which would have won us the league, right? And so you're not going to do that necessarily by just having a little bit more depth in the same positions for the same formation that we already struggle with. We need somebody. And how do you how do you get those 25 points back? You do it by having amazing top level right wing backs and left wing backs. You do it by having an Eriksen figure or somebody that can split the pass. And in terms of spending 60 million quid on a centre back, again, caveat, I'm not saying, Sim, that we don't need to improve in those positions. We do. But to think that it should be the main priority when we only dropped 5 goals from our last 8 games, we dropped 8 goals from our last 15 games in the Premier League. I'm not saying that we don't need to improve, but I just think that we need to spend the real money and spend the real focus of my attention on a right wing back. And people like Jed Spence, for me, don't excite me. I'd like to see us go and do it. And if that means that we spend a little bit less money than spending 60 on a Richarlison, and then being able to say you go and get someone else for 25, 30, add that 30 million you're saving and go and put it in for a bid for someone who's a monster in the right wing back spot, then that's how you solve for the gaps that we had in our season. I'm not saying Richarlison's bad. I'm not saying we don't need forwards or centre backs. I just think we're prioritising things incorrectly. That's my take.
No, I take your point, and I think that's a fair. I do think that's a fair point. I think a good right wing back right now is obviously even just as a case of starting 11. It's obviously should be more of a priority than getting someone like Richarlison. Look, we don't know the details of the deal yet. The rumours at the moment, it could be 60 million. We don't know what that's made up of. We don't know if it's what plus bonuses and all this kind of stuff. If a player's involved, how much of that money is from writing off a future fee for Dele Alli or whatever. We don't know the current makeup of the deal, but I think for me, it's been having really good, not just backup, but options apart from Kane and Son has been a major problem for years now. This isn't just been a new problem, and I think that I'm just very happy that we're finally addressing with real quality. We're not putting a plaster over it by signing like an aging Llorente or signing a player who was a one-season wonder in Holland like Vincent Janssen, or a player who we're not quite sure about like Njin and Kudu, who might be good and might be shit, and they both turned out to be shit. We're paying good money for a player we know can do it in the Premier League, can fight to be amongst the elite to prove himself, and I think he can go on to a new level. So for me, I think there's money there. There should be money there anyway, even if we do drop 60 on Richarlison. I don't see why we can't drop another big fee after that. I personally don't see why not. With the budget we already have plus player sales, why can't there be a big pool of money?
Let me ask you this as a comparison. Would you rather Richarlison as the forwards selection and Jed Spence as the right wing back, or would you rather take your pick? But I keep banging on about Emmanuel Dennis. I just think the guy's the most pound for pound, highly valued, Premiership proven player that's pound for pound quality. So I'm going to use him as the example, but it could be anybody else. Would you rather Richarlison and Jed Spence to fit those two specific positions, or would you rather Emmanuel Dennis and, let's say, I'm not going to say Hakimi because I think that's completely insane as much as I love him, but let's say a Pereira from Leicester, right? Someone like him. Would you rather go and strengthen that in a bigger role? If you had to pick one of those two options, because I just think Jed Spence isn't good enough for me to be the exciting main guy, especially when you got Matt Doherty, mate, who no one knows what he's going to come back like after that injury. It's a big, bad injury. We don't know what sort of Doherty we're going to see. And I know how everyone feels about Emerson. So, yeah.
I think that from the right wing back spot, I obviously think we need really good quality there. I don't dispute that. And I think it's very, very important for Conte's system, the way he uses wing backs. But we see it's a lot harder to mold a player with less quality up front to get them to a higher ability than it is to maybe mold someone into a wing back position. Because I think we've seen Conte do that before with wing backs, improve players to become really effective wing backs, like a Victor Moses or Marcos Alonso or something like that, where they've become really effective options. But when it comes to having a player like, say, I know, look, like an Emmanuel Dennis. He's, even though he was brilliant last season, he's still a bit unproven because it was only 6 months he was brilliant. For the next 6 months, he really fell off a cliff. I think, and a lot to do with Watford stopped him going for African Cup of Nations, and that really pissed him off and stuff like that, and that contributed to a bad feeling potentially. But I still think that it's. I don't look. I like Emmanuel Dennis actually, and I've said before. I'd like to bring him in for 20 million. I think he's definitely
one third of the price, right?
Yeah, he is one third of the price.
Scored more goals from open play than Richarlison did as well in half of the season, essentially. You know?
Yeah, that's true. It's true, and that's that last season. That's absolutely true. But I just believe in Richarlison's ability. Richarlison, you got to remember as well. 2 years ago, was subject to I think it was an £80 million bid from Barcelona. They wanted him through the door. They rejected the bid, and Ancelotti said, "Look, if you stay with us, I promise you we're going to be getting Champions League football." That was 2 years ago, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to stay. We're going to knuckle down." He put that Barcelona bid behind him. You know, that season they finished painfully mid-table, and the next season they were in a relegation battle. You got to think of what that does to a player's mentality who had nearly went to one of the biggest clubs in the whole of Europe. Was very sometimes a player like him needs a renewed challenge to up that motivation. I believe Tottenham is the perfect place for him. I really believe that.
I'm okay with, like I say,
I take your point. I take your point in the wing backs, but I just think forwards are harder to come by, and if we're able to get someone like him through the door with that kind of quality, I think you got to take it because they're harder to come by.
Yeah, and that's fine, mate. Listen, like I say, I like Richarlison. I love players that create shithousery. I also think that he doesn't get anywhere near enough respect as he deserves for his defensive capabilities. The way he tracks back, the pressures I think he's in the top 99 percentile for a forward in terms of successful pressures in the final third, the midfield third. His defensive stats, not that you necessarily want to, prioritize that when you're reviewing a forward, but they shouldn't be sniffed at, right? He's definitely a class player. My like I said before, my contention with buying him is just what does it mean for the budget and where else do we need to go? Because not only do we need to focus on the right wing back, not only do I think we also need to find somebody who can do creative stuff in the midfield, Ala and Eriksen, but I also worry a little bit about our left wing back spot. I think that if there's any kind of presumption or suggestion that Reguilon's going to move on, and not that there's been a hell of a lot of news out there, but I think that a lot of people don't necessarily see Reguilon being a part of Tottenham next season, then at the moment you've got a 33-year-old in Perisic who I'm so excited to see playing a Tottenham shirt. But he also has utility. He can play in many different spots. But to put the pressure, the potential pressure of making him play 40, 50 games, and I only say that because Sessegnon is the most injury-prone left wing-back in Premier League history. He plays 4 games. He drops for 4 games. He plays for 5. He's down for 5. But you can't rely on this guy. And it's a lot of pressure. I know that Perisic is a physical specimen. I know he's not particularly injury prone, although he has had a history with it. But for me, I just worry that if we start the season with our 3 recognised left wing backs as Perisic, Sessegnon, who's injury prone, and Doherty, who can do a job there, but who also is coming back from an injury and is currently an unknown entity, I worry about that. I do worry about that. And so I'm not, like I said, just to clarify, Richarlison for me is a good signing at the right price. And the right price, I don't think, is 60 million quid.
What is the right price for you?
If you can get it to, in terms of cash, if you can get it to 30 million cash or lower, and then make up the difference in getting rid of players that are surplus to requirements, like a Harry Winks, then I'm all aboard it. And even if he comes in at 60 million quid, I'll still get behind him. I'll still chant his name and hope he does brilliantly, and I hope that he proves my reservations wrong. I just, like I say, it's more just around the value for money and where we can go elsewhere, and also the other priorities.
Well, look, Conte, I'm sure would, if he really thinks of it as a priority issue, then he'll makes his feelings known about what he wants. And if he's ready to sanction, if he must know the budget, he must know what's going on, and Paratici as well. We all know that we've wanted better wing backs for a while now. So I gotta hope we do sign it. I want at least one. Look, I know Spence is a young player, and I do have reservations if we go into our season with wing backs being Spence, Doherty, Perisic, and Sessegnon. Is that enough? I do have worries about that. I'm not going to lie, but I'm hoping maybe there's more to it than just those four. I really hope we don't go into the season with those four, because I don't know if that's going to be enough to kick on as much as we want to. But maybe Spence can surprise us. You never know. Maybe we really believe he's ready to make the step up, because every time he's played a Premier League team, he's been a standout.
True. Very good point.
Against Leicester and against Arsenal, he was absolutely brilliant that whole FA Cup run. He got Young Player of the Month. He was got in Team of the Year for the Championship. So maybe he is one we've seen him enough times to think this guy is ready to step up to Premier League football, but then it puts a lot of pressure on Matt Doherty to recapture that form he was finding in February and March when he was brilliant. Yeah. He really was playing like he was at Wolves. So there is a lot of questions. I think
it's a lottery, though, isn't it, Sim?
It's more questions than answers with those four wing back options. I agree with you, but just because we're spending this much on Richarlison doesn't mean for me that's the reason we're neglecting the wing backs. If we neglect the wing backs, I don't think it's because we're signing big on Richarlison. It was because we're neglecting them. I don't think it's intertwined.
I'm not suggesting that they are intertwined, but I don't think we live in. I've seen some in the comments saying, "Why do I worry about the money so much?" I worry about the money so much, but this isn't FIFA and it's not. It's not Football Manager where you could just sell players and buy players willy nilly and create money out of thin air. Like there's not a bottomless pit of money, right? There isn't. There should be some money available. I don't know. None of us know how much is available, but it doesn't take too much common sense to figure out that if you're spending 60 million quid, then that is 60 million quid that can't go elsewhere. And I think we actually agree on this, right, Sim? I think the only way that's we both think that the right wing back is a priority. We both worry about left wing back. We both know that. That the centre-back options, we definitely need improvement. I know we're going to move on to that one in a second. But I think the only difference between our opinions is whether or not, I guess, Jed Spence is a punt at 25 million, a lottery ticket, and I agree with you, he did play well in the two Premier League games, or two games against Premier League opposition, but I just find it's a lottery ticket, and whether we win or lose, it's a big gamble to take. It's like going to the roulette and putting your month's rent on red or black. I think that the season could depend on that right wing back spot. And if he is the best that we have, it could come in on red or it could come in on black. And so for me, I worry about that. And like I say, I just feel like with Richarlison, I'd like the guy. I think he's a great player. I think he does a hell of a lot for the team. I'm just not entirely convinced that he's worth the money that you are. And I think that you have to factor in that wherever you spend on him, you could be spending somewhere else. And that's where my reservations.
What would your opinion be like if we do spend big on Richarlison, then we also go big on one of the other positions as well?
Happy days, happy days. As long as we, I don't care about the finances after the window. I'm sure they'll figure that stuff out. If the club can find a way to pay for everything, and come August the 7th, when the season starts, if we've got a world-class right wing back, we've got defensive options, we've got everything sorted, and we're all happy. I'm not saying that Richarlison. I'm never going to sit here and say that I worry about Richarlison being in a Tottenham shirt. I know he's going to do business for us, right? He'll do, and I think he'll be a good player. But this is all ifs, buts, and maybes. For me, it's like I still look at that and go, to your point, how do you feel if we can go and buy him and buy everybody else? Yeah, dream world. But I don't think that's under Daniel Levy. I don't think that's usually been the style, has it? So
well, hopefully there's a change. We do know that on Saturday that the Spurs transferred 100 million into their from the 150 million into their account just for transfers. So maybe that's an indication of that at least we know after 60 million there's an extra 40 million there for something, not including player. Well, that's probably not including player sales and whatnot. So there is an indication of how much money there could be available. In terms of, just quickly on Richarlison, when I see people say like they're not happy because they don't think he's good enough. They think they want a higher quality player coming in. They think it's not an ambitious signing. There's not enough ambition. Take away the other things we've been saying about whether we want to prioritize centre back and money and all that kind of stuff. Do you believe Richarlison is an ambitious signing?
Yes. Yeah. He is. He's good enough to. Sorry, he's good enough to improve. it's all about improvements, right? But I also think there should be a baseline analysis of, you know, if you're trying to be the Man Cities, if you're trying to beat the Liverpools, you look at the players we're trying to sign. Would they get into? Would Liverpool or Manchester City on any given Sunday have them at some point in their match day 25 or 20, whatever it is next season, 25, 28 players? And I think that Richarlison would be deemed good enough of an asset for Liverpool, whether he starts for Liverpool or whether he sits on the bench. Would he start for Man City? Would he sit on the bench? I do think that Richarlison is there or thereabouts. I'm not sure he's a definite, but I think he's on that kind of that kind of cusp. And therefore, for me, I think it's ambitious. But I also think that a certain percentage of Tottenham fans are slightly guilty of looking at the biggest name player that Spurs have been linked to in every position, and then getting that fixated in their head. And then that's the stake. And then once they've sampled or smelt the kind of the aroma of the steak, and then suddenly, whether or not that's realistic, suddenly they're offered, compared to the steak, it's a burger. And that's what I think we're going to be talking about with people like Clement Lenglet in a minute. But I think Richarlison, some people that don't want Richarlison might be saying, well, who do you really want? And they'll say Lautaro Martinez, right? Even though that's just it's not possible. But because they're comparing everything to Martinez, suddenly Richarlison's not good enough. And I think that that's a common theme with Spurs fans a little bit, or some Spurs fans.
I agree. I completely agree with that. And I also got to think as well, when I think about this Richarlison deal, just in terms of what we need from another striker, like we have, like people got to remember, we have Son and Kane and Kulusevski already, 3 of the best forwards right now in the Premier League, the way they're performing, especially Son and Kane. We know that. So we don't need a player to come in and score 30 goals. That's not the requirement that we need. We have that. We have that in Kane. We have that in some. These players can get 20, 25, 30 goals. What we need is someone who, when they're not having a good time of it, can step up for us. And if that means scoring between 10 and 15 goals in a season, that's all we need. That's perfect for me. Like he might score more, or we might, but like for me, an extra player who can at least get 10 goals in a season. Like you got to remember, our third top goal scorer last season was after Kulusevski with 5, and after that was like
own
goal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that is exactly the standard we're at the moment in terms of relying on goal scorers. We need people who can pitch in with goals. And I think for me, if Richarlison gets, people say, oh, he's only going to get 10 goals. I was like, that's perfect. That's all we need, 10, 15 goals. That's perfect.
Do you think he could be a 20 goal season? If let's say, horrible worst case scenario, Harry Kane goes down with a bad ankle injury in August or September, and he's out for 3 or 4 months, do you think that Richarlison could step up and play and get the 20 goals that we would otherwise expect Harry Kane to do?
I'm not 100% sure whether Conte would put Son up top and put Richarlison on the left, or put Richarlison up front. But I do think if Kane got ruled out for the season, I think Richarlison good enough. He can get 20 goals. Definitely in all competitions. I don't know about just Premier League, but definitely in all competitions he can get 20 goals. I'm sure of that. I really think he can.